Okay, what's up, folks? Let me just give people a little bit of time to log in here. We're a little bit early, and I forgot to set a few things here. Let me get to this really, really quickly before we officially begin. And I think that's just about everything. Let me just make sure we're loaded on all the platforms here. Rockfin is up. What's up, Rockfin? YouTube. Rockfin beat YouTube. Rockfin beat YouTube today. There is YouTube. Okay. All right. So we are up on all of the platforms. What's up? What's up, Edwin? How are you, buddy? Good to see you. Happy Sunday. Everyone say hello. What's up, Robin? Good to see everybody. And we are officially live. Let's begin. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good happy Sunday. This is the kind of new way of doing Get Your News On with Ron. We're going to do the regular show right now, and then we'll do the patron stream immediately after. And yeah, I kind of like that format. I've been kind of digging it. I hope y'all have been digging it as well. But let's go ahead and get started. And people who listen to the podcast, nothing's really changed much for y'all, except that it drops on Sundays now instead of Thursdays. And yeah, I think it's working. I dig it. Hope you dig it as well, which, by the way, podcast listeners, please do leave a 5-star review. That is very, very helpful. So we have a lot to talk about today. The Department of Justice might investigate Ticketmaster. That's a good thing, and we'll talk about as to why. It doesn't just pertain to Ticketmaster. It pertains to a bunch of other stuff, too. And also, speaking of the whole Ticketmaster thing, one of the things that spurned that conversation in the first place was Bruce Springsteen tickets going for about $5,000 a piece. And Bruce Springsteen has finally addressed that. We're going to mention that. As a lifelong Springsteen fan, I feel like we should mention that part. And I'll give you guys a little bit of a foreshadow here. This one's going to hurt a little bit, but we're going to talk about it. Also, we got a little bit of uplifting news and hopeful news in the antitrust world, in other sections of the antitrust world. But first, unfortunately, there is some breaking news that has just kind of surfaced pretty much this morning. That is very, very tragic and terrible. And I mean, well, let's just dive into it. This may be your first time hearing about this. Gunman kills 5 at LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs before patrons confront and stop him. So a 22-year-old gunman entered an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs, Colorado, just before midnight Saturday. So as of the recording of this, it is Sunday morning here in California as we're streaming this. So this happened last night in Colorado. So the gunman immediately opened fire, killed at least 5 people, injured 18 others. The suspect in the shooting at Club Q was identified as Anderson Lee Aldrich, according to Colorado Springs Police Chief Adrian Vasquez. He used a long rifle in the shooting, and 2 firearms were found at the scene. At least 2 people inside the club confronted and fought the gunman and prevented future violence. The violence lasted just minutes. I don't know why they say violence. They just say the shooting. I mean, it was a shooting. They could say shooting or terrorist attack. But anyway, the violence, this is over at the CNN, by the way, lasted just minutes. Police received numerous 9/11 calls starting at 11:56 p.m. Officers were dispatched. A total of 39 patrol officers responded. Of the 18 people injured, several are in critical condition. So they don't know exactly how many people were injured, and we may have some more fatalities. I mean, so far, 5 people are dead. There might be more, but that's just what we know of so far because some people are in critical condition. So that's what we woke up to on a Sunday morning. And I have heard this record before. We have all heard it. First of all, when it comes to shootings, I mean, like I said the other week, I believe on Status Quo, I've lost track. And by the way, I'm not even a journalist. I'm not like a traditional news person. I'm a comedian who talks about news that I care about, and occasionally I collaborate with other news networks. but I'm not a journalist and I don't pretend to be. But even somebody in my space, I can't even tell you how many shootings I've covered in real time. I've lost count. I have no idea. People who are like actual journalists, I'm sure I mean, it's like waking up and having your morning coffee and nothing is going to be done. No, we can't even utter the conversation of having a more common sense weapons policy in this country. Other countries, there's all kinds of models we could look to. People in America, they entertain this fantasy that nowhere else has guns except for them. And they also entertain this fantasy in the United States that because we have as many guns as we do, that's why we have the supposed liberty that we have, because they're somehow scared of our guns, which you really think the powers that be who have the United States military, most powerful military in the world, on their side. They have a completely militarized police force that can kill people at will and does so all the time on their side. You really think they're scared of your gun collection? That's what keeps them at bay. And second of all, if there was any validity in that, why wouldn't we have a higher quality of life in the United States? Why wouldn't the United States be some amazing place to live with the highest quality of life, which it doesn't offer, by the way? If you think like, well, we do have the highest quality, and we don't. We don't. I promise you that. I don't believe there's any such thing as the greatest country in the world, but I can tell you when it comes to quality of life, there are a lot of places that offer a hell of a lot better than the United States. Is anywhere perfect? Hell no. But is there way better than here? Yeah. So if your guns were supposedly keeping the powerful at bay, why don't we have a higher quality life? If there's any truth in that, there's no truth in that. It's a bogus delusion. But we can't even have the conversation about a more common sense weapons policy to prevent guns from getting in the wrong hands and to do better, because a lot of other countries, they still have guns. Other countries, there are guns in England, there are guns in Italy, there are guns in other countries. They just have different laws. They have laws about registering the firearms. They have different safety requirements. They have ammunition protections. They have, in certain places, you have to keep the firearms in a certain place and you're taught how to use it. And there's so many things we could do. Voluntary buyback programs, registering your gun like a car, ammunition regulation, classes, references. There are so many things we can do that would help prevent getting guns in the wrong hands of people. We ain't going to do any of that. We won't even have the conversation. So forget that. Now, as far as I have heard this record before, we have heard this record before. Look, I remember when gay people were the problem, when homophobia was the beat to distract everyone. Let's make people think that homosexuals are the problem of all of society ills. Instead of really looking at the system of capitalism that's screwing everybody. Blame the gay person. Let's lean on your homophobia. I remember when that was happening, and you know what happened? There was an uptick of violence against the LGBTQ community. Well, now there's a new homophobia, and the new sophomore record is transphobia. So now the transgender person is part of all of society else. Instead of looking at what's really going on in this society, let's worry about what bathroom a transgender person is going into. Or let's talk about transgender swimmers, which, by the way, when that story was being talked about, all the people who had their opposition, I didn't hear anybody who actually knew the system itself. When the Leah Thomas thing happened, people were making it out like she was swimming and she was he, and she was a shitty swimmer as a man. So she just one day decided, well, I'm a woman now, and just started competing with women and dominating. That's literally not what happened. That can't happen. That would be against the rules. The way it works is that you have to go through hormone therapy. If you are going to transition, you have to go through hormone therapy for at least a year. And during that time, you have to compete with your birth gender. That's why transgendered athletes who just socially transition, which means there's no hormone therapy involved, they still compete with their birth gender. So there is already a process involved as to when you can compete with the different gender. So what actually happened with Leah Thomas is, first of all, she wasn't bad when she was a he. She was a competitive swimmer as a man. She was, competing at a certain level. Then she started going through hormone therapy while still competing as a man. So her times got slower and slower because she was transitioning into a new body. And then when she was competing as a female, her times eventually got up to the same level of competition that she had when she was competing as a man. Like she was at a certain level as a female, certain level as a man, and they were neck and neck. And then what happened? Well, as most college athletes do, she improved. That's how college sports typically works. Usually you're doing better as a senior than you did as a sophomore. That's how it's supposed to work. So her times got better and she won something. So in other words, we would have never even heard about this had she not won anything. If she wouldn't have won, this never would have even made the news. And I didn't hear anybody who had an issue talk about the rule itself and what was wrong with the rule. And that's a very simple. Okay, if you have a problem with this, what's wrong with the rule? It's a year. Should it be longer than a year? Should it be less than a year? I mean, that's something. And by the way, I have no idea the answer to that question. I will divert to the people who know a lot more about this than myself. But if you have a problem with her competing, you have to say, well, what's the problem with the rule? And if you don't have a problem with the rule or can't articulate a problem with the rule, then either you're pontificating on faulty information because you don't know what actually happened, or you just have a problem with transgendered people and you don't want to say that. I mean, let's call it for what it is. So they use all of these scapegoats, and this is scapegoating. That's exactly what it is. And then what happens? More violence against the transgender community. And they've gotten people to believe the most ridiculous. It got to the point where they have people believing that there's litter boxes in school classrooms, which, by the way, that is so painfully insulting to transgender people. And it's also bullshit that never happened. They have people believing that any counselor meant to help LGBTQ youth isn't there so that they can help kids who are LGBTQ youth navigate school better so that maybe they have a better experience, presumably, than they had when they were in school. That they're there to groom your kid. They want to groom your kid. They want people to believe that Timmy walks into a counselor's office and says, "Hey, I'm kind of confused," and by noon, Timmy is Jane now. That never happens. That never has happened. That's completely ridiculous. That is bizarre paranoia at an atrocious level. And then they're passing these bills that are aimed at just making life even more miserable for LGBTQ youth. And they're like, no, 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 it's just about parental involvement. Did you actually read that thing? That's not what it's about. So they're doing all these homophobic, transphobic things. And now transphobia is the new homophobia. They're leaning into that. And now more shootings are happening. And I don't see how society hasn't been like, we've heard this record before. We're not going to fall for it this time. But every time people are like, no, 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 it's different this time. Don't you remember when they were just scapegoating gay people? And no, 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 it's different this time. It's different with transgender people because people are grooming our kids and they're this is ridiculous. And now there's even factions on the so-called left who they say, "Oh, this is just a wedge issue. Don't talk about it, blah blah blah." That's just shit liberty, quote unquote. No, it isn't. No, it's not a wedge issue when other groups of people when people are trying to eliminate groups of people. When they're trying to eliminate groups of people, that's not a freaking wedge issue. And by the way, that's another sign of fascism. Fascism goes after the most marginalized. That's something fascism has always done. So if you don't give a shit about anyone except for yourself, and you don't give a shit about marginalized communities at all, and you write it off as just, oh, it's just a wedge thing. It's just a that's first of all, what a gross way to look at the world. And second of all, that's not a leftist position at all. At all. Full stop. And by the way, that doesn't mean that people don't weaponize identity politics for deceptive means. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of bullshit when people are like, "Oh, you don't like Pete Buttigieg? You must be homophobic." No, I'm opposed to his politics. Oh, you don't like Hillary Clinton? You must be sexist. Oh, you don't like you actually tell the truth about Barack Obama's presidency? You must be racist. Yeah, that's bullshit. That's weaponizing identity politics for very dishonest means. And that sucks. But that doesn't mean you got to go full reactionary and pretend like issues of racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia aren't real. They are real and they are serious. And we still need to be vocal about it. And we also need to be vocal when it is weaponized for dishonest means. So, anyway, what a way to start a Sunday, huh? So that's happening. We'll watch it unfold. And again, you know, we heard this record in the 90s. We heard this record in the early 2000s. This is just the new record. Transphobia is the new homophobia, folks. And it's bullshit. And it's always been bullshit. It's just hateful, fear-mongering bullshit. And, my heart goes out to the people who lost their lives for no reason. And, everybody who tries to downplay transgendered issues, who tries to downplay horrible, bigoted pieces of legislation, who tries to just, hit the talking points to score a gig on Fox News. It's freaking gross. It's freaking gross. So let's move on to Ticketmaster. So, all right. Ticketmaster is they pretty much have a monopoly on ticketing in live concerts because what happened, and we watched this video on the show. We won't watch it again, but what happened was Live Nation became one of the biggest live concert promoters out there. They have like all the big acts, and Ticketmaster was dominating the ticketing industry. Live Nation wanted to do their own ticketing so they could make more money. Ticketmaster thought, "Ooh, that's bad." So Ticketmaster and Live Nation decided to merge. And of course, the people who actually are supposed to enforce antitrust in this country looked around. They were like, "We see no problems here." So they merged and they completely gutted the concert industry. And now Ticketmaster owns a bunch of freaking other ticketing companies too, to the point where you might not even know if your event is ticketed through a Ticketmaster company. It's a homework assignment to figure out which fucking ticketing companies they own. So it's pretty much close to a monopoly. It's a near monopoly. And they recently employed a thing called fair market ticketing, where people basically bid on tickets. And this made national news because Bruce Springsteen tickets were going for about $5,000 a piece. Not all of them, but some of them going for about $5,000 a piece. And that was an especially look for Bruce Springsteen, who, is kind of billed as a working class act and throughout history has done some good. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But so that happened. And now a bunch of and then more recently the Taylor Swift thing happened where her tickets were going for a crazy amount and then all of a sudden you couldn't even get her tickets anymore and a bunch of people are outraged. So now here's what's happening. This is from More Perfect Union. Breaking: Ticketmaster is under investigation by the Justice Department for abusing its monopoly power. This is per the New York Times. This happened earlier this week. Ticketmaster is destroying live music. Their scam fees now cost as much as 78% of a ticket. They control the events, the venues, even the artists. Now there's a movement pushing the Justice Department to take on their monopoly. More than 40,000 people have sent letters urging the Department of Justice to investigate Ticketmaster and to move to break them up. And so there's a URL here. And you can go to actionnetwork.org and you can say, tell the Department of Justice to investigate Ticketmaster. Again, that URL is actionnetwork.org. Type in, tell the Department of Justice to investigate Ticketmaster, and you can sign that petition. And now apparently the Justice Department is moving and they're going to be investigating Ticketmaster. So we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously, this is just the start, but this is a good sign. And again, you can go to actionnetwork.org, tell the Department of Justice to investigate Ticketmaster. Please go there. Please go there and sign up. So they're doing something about Ticketmaster, which is good. This might lead to nothing. This might lead to absolutely nothing, but at least things are moving. Now, second piece of this, Bruce Springsteen, in light of all this, has finally spoken up about his ticket prices because when this happened, Bruce Springsteen wasn't really saying anything about it. And people were like, what the hell? This is not, this is not the Bruce Springsteen that we know and love. What's going on here? So Bruce Springsteen finally spoke up about this. And I gotta admit, as a lifelong Springsteen fan, this hurts a little bit. We're gonna get into this, but first, a quick preamble. I'm a firm believer in not having heroes. You guys know that about me. So Bruce Springsteen is not a hero by any means. He's just a guy who I've enjoyed his music over the years. But I also think he's a guy who does some good. And over the years, I've appreciated that about him. I've respected that about him, and I've celebrated that about him. He was very outspoken against the Iraq War when it wasn't popular to do so. He was outspoken about the Bush administration. And based on his actions, he seems to want to do a lot of good. I mean, yeah, politically, he's kind of a little more just kind of blue no matter who and stuff like that. But it's not because he doesn't have good intentions. It's because that's just what he knows, right? So, and I can tell you this, as somebody, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I had some family friends who worked at the food bank there. Every year, they had the Springsteen concert, which he typically played Pittsburgh once a year. They had the Springsteen concert marked on their calendar. Why? Or were they all huge Springsteen fans? Not really. Some of them were, some of them weren't. But what Bruce Springsteen did in every city he went to, and I think he still does this, I'm assuming he does, is he would make a pitch for the local food bank, and he would make a contribution himself to that local food bank, and he would encourage others to do the same. And it got to the point where they relied on a Bruce Springsteen show for their fiscal year. The amount of donations and food they got because of him really made a significant difference in what they were able to do each year. So that was something that he did. He didn't have to do it, but he realized, hey, I have a big freaking pull. I'm going to try to help out hungry people. So those are the types of things Bruce Springsteen did over the years. And to me, that's good. I mean, that's cool that he's more than just a successful rock star, that he's kind of using his platform to help. That's cool. And yeah, I was bummed out when he did a podcast with Obama. Sure. But I don't think Bruce Springsteen did a podcast with Obama because he thought, I love the fact that he dropped a lot of drones or something like that. I love Reaganism. I think Bruce Springsteen did a podcast with Barack Obama because he's like, look, the GOP is a huge threat, and the Democrats are the alternative in my mind. And so, sure. Again, I wish that we lived in a society where we had a more representative politics, where there was less of a corporate stranglehold on our politics, to where there's just two Wall Street sponsored right-wing teams, Wall Street right-wing team D and Wall Street right-wing team R. And I think if we lived in that society, someone like a Bruce Springsteen would be more aligned with the Greens or something like that. But it's just not seen as a viable thing in the U.S. So, people are just more inclined to go like, all right, I'm just going to vote Democrat. Cool. So, yeah. But again, it still bums me out. But my point is, this is a guy who I enjoy his music, and he has done some good. But this statement is so disappointing. As so with all that in mind, this statement is a bummer. I'm not gonna lie, this hurts. Here's what he said. Bruce Springsteen defends high ticket prices for upcoming tour. Why shouldn't that money go to the guys that are going to be up there sweating 3 hours a night for it? So here's what Bruce said. Um, what I do is a very simple thing. I tell my guys, go out and see what everyone else is doing. Let's charge a little less. That's generally the directions. They go and sell it out. For the past 49 years or however long we've been playing, we've pretty much been out there under market value. I've enjoyed that. It's been great for the fans. This time I told them, hey, we're 73 years old. The guys are there. I want to do what everyone else is doing, my peers. So that's what happened. That's what they did. But ticket buying has gotten very confusing, not just for the fans, but for the artists also. And the bottom line is that most of our tickets are totally affordable. They're in that affordable range. We have those tickets that are going for the higher that are going to go for the higher price somewhere anyway. Ticket broker or someone is going to be taking that money. I'm going, hey, why shouldn't that money go to the guys who are going to be up there sweating 3 hours a night for it? It created an opportunity for that to occur. And so at that point, we went for it. I know it was unpopular with some fans, but if there's any complaints on the way out, you can have your money back. Yeah, that's disappointing. So basically he's saying, look, we always charged a little less than our peers and we like doing it that way. I'm 73 now. I said, let's just do what everyone else is doing. This fair market thing that Ticketmaster's doing is the new thing now. And so that's happening. And guess what? Tickets get price gouged anyway. Now they're just happening initially. You understand what he's saying, right? Like he's saying, the ticket price gets jacked up anyway through brokers and stuff like that. So now it's just getting jacked up initially because people are bidding on it. So, we get a bigger cut of that pie. Instead of just so first of all, his basic response is like, "Yeah, whatever." And that's so disappointing. And by the way, it doesn't have to be that way. He could have said, "Look, this is a bummer new policy. This is causing tickets to just really be outrageous. We're not a big fan of this. We understand that the front row seats go for more than the other seats, and there's still affordable tickets to our shows. But this is a crappy new policy. We're just one of many artists that are part of it. And we hope Ticketmaster ceases this practice. And what would be really cool is if he would have said, if they don't, we will not be working with them next year. Pearl Jam did it. Pearl Jam said, we don't like what Ticketmaster does. They're monopolizing the music industry. We're freaking done. So, yeah, you can do it. You can do it yourself and you can still make plenty of money. You think Pearl Jam's starving now? They're fine. It just takes a little more legwork. And by the way, you're not going to be doing that legwork. Your staff is. Springsteen himself said, hey, I just tell them, let's do what everyone else is doing. All he would have to do is say, hey, we're not working with Ticketmaster anymore. And his staff would freaking figure it out. And guess what? Everyone would make money. So, disappointing. Very disappointing. And yeah, Springsteen's one of those artists that, yeah, I expect a little better from. Because he has a history of doing better. But, again, don't have heroes, folks. You can't have heroes. It's a disappointing take from him. And, I still love the music. And I still, Springsteen has done a lot of good over the years, and I appreciate it. And you know who has done an awful lot of good over the years is Steven Van Zandt. I really respect the hell out of Steven Van Zandt. He probably has no say in this. He's just a member of the band. But, I respect the hell out of that guy. That guy does a ton for music education. His nonprofit helps out a lot of children in schools. He is basically keeping the spirit of radio alive with Little Steven's Underground Garage over on Sirius XM. He puts out a lot of great records. He has helped the careers of countless indie musicians, some of whom I know personally. And he's made some freaking good television. I respect the hell out of that guy, and I still do. Obviously, this is Bruce Springsteen, not Steven Van Zandt making this statement. So, but, I got a lot of love for E Street Nation is my point. And, this is a bummer. This is a bummer. Bruce's statement, this one hurts. So, yeah, that's my take on that. I had to include it as a lifelong Springsteen fan. Gotta, gotta, gotta acknowledge it. Gotta acknowledge it. So, you know, his kind of laissez-faire, no pun intended there, or no like inclination, but his laissez-faire attitude about this is pretty disappointing. But hey, I'm still born to run. Right? I don't know. That was cheesy. Anyway, all right, let's move on. Okay. So a little bit of good news in the antitrust world. Little bit of good news. Not like, oh my God, let's run to the hills and rejoice news, but little bit of something. So we have been pushing, and you can go sign the petition at BidenPromise.us. We'll pull that up at the end here. We have been petitioning for action on the antitrust bills during the lame duck section. Here's a little bit of good news. The White House is pushing Congress to rein in big tech before the GOP takes over the House. So it's working, folks. With only a few weeks left to pass two high-profile antitrust bills targeting big tech, the White House is privately pushing the offices of the Democratic leaders in Congress to pass the legislative packages. In private meetings with the staffs of Senate Majority Chuck Schumer and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, not the House Speaker anymore, actually, but this is from time, and this is a few days old, multiple sources say White House officials have emphasized that it's a priority to pass the American Innovation and Choice Online Act, ACOA, and the Open App Markets Act, OMA, which are the two antitrust bills that we've been talking about on this show for months now. So the pressure is working. It is working. The White House, is there a chance they're just going to wait out the clock? Abso-freaking-lutely. There's a chance they'll just wait out the clock. But now at least there is some pressure from above for Chuck Schumer to act on this. The White House is being vocal. That would not have happened without this campaign. The Biden administration would have loved to have just been quiet about it, but they're not because we've been so freaking loud. And this win is an attainable one. Please help. Go to BidenPromise.us. It takes less than 30 seconds. Contact your representatives. Demand action on these bills. It is working. It is working. We actually have a chance to win this one. Let's get this win. Because this is, look, and again, that URL is BidenPromised.us. BidenPromised.us. And this is huge because every piece of antitrust, whether it's in the tech world or the ticket world, this is a big deal because, antitrust is front and center right now. You know why? Because there's a merger that's about to happen between Kroger and Albertsons. And if it goes through, and there's a good chance it will, if it goes through, now this goes beyond, well, I don't really care about digital rights, so I don't really care about antitrust. I don't go to concerts, so I don't really care about Ticketmaster. Okay, well, do you eat food? I bet you eat food, don't you? If this merger goes through between Kroger and Albertsons, our grocery chain is going to be completely a near monopoly. It's going to be a near monopoly, and it's happening at a time where food prices are already high. What does that mean? That means that they're going to say, well, Americans are already used to the high food prices, so we're going to keep that going. We're not going to lower the prices. We have a monopoly now. We can get away with it because people don't have an alternative because they need to eat freaking food. And there's food deserts in this country. So they are literally going to price people out of being able to eat. That's what is going to happen if this merger goes through. I am not embellishing. And what's going to happen in return? Well, they're going to make more commodity products, more quote economic products for lower income people. So lower income people will just be eating horrible freaking food, which is, by the way, already the case, but it's going to get even worse. Eating healthy in this country is a privileged thing. You have to either grow your own food or have access to a community garden, or you have enough means to be able to do it. It's very expensive to eat healthy in the United States. It's not impossible, but it's very expensive. Which, by the way, it's like the opposite in other countries. In other countries, like produce and stuff like that is really affordable because it's like you're growing it, it's local. Here in the US, we most of the produce was made in a freaking lab or whatever. And yeah, it's absolutely, our food culture is absolutely disgusting, and it's about to get even worse. It's completely disgusting, and it's about to get even worse. So, if this goes through, you're going to see more food insecure people. And again, I'm not trying to be over alarmist here, but seriously, if you can grow your own food, do it. If you can't, maybe you're in an urban area. There's probably urban gardens. Find out what's going on. Find out who maintains those gardens. Find out the organizations in your community. Know about every local garden in your neighborhood and make sure at least one of them is getting your compost, and start composting if you're not already. It's an easy thing to do. You keep it in your freezer and then you give it to people who are going to use it to grow freaking food. That's what I do. I can tell you where my compost goes, and I get to eat the harvest of my compost. Go to your freaking farmers markets. Support your farmers markets. If the prices are high at your farmers market, it's because not enough people patronize it. So they have to keep their prices high because not enough people are going. If more people go, the prices go down. So, they're going after our food. So this is way more, and all of these antitrust issues are connected. They're all connected. Everything from reining in big tech through antitrust tech bills, OMA and ACOA, to Ticketmaster and the Department of Justice trying to break them up, or at least investigating, possibly breaking them up, to Albertson and Kroger merging. And I promise you, at least one of those affects your life a lot. At least one of those really affects your life. I mean, I've gotten it. People tell me, oh, digital rights, that's not that big of a deal. Well, it is, because the internet's a utility in your life, first of all. And I've gotten the whole, like, I don't go to concerts. I'm allergic to fun. Why do I give a shit about Ticketmaster? Because this is all antitrust. And guess what? You eat food, don't you? You eat food. You eat food. I like how sometimes I really direct my comments at just apathetic Twitter trolls that probably don't watch this show. Like, most of the people watching and listening are like, yeah, Ron, that's totally not us. We actually care about this stuff already. That's why we tune into your show, which I guess, you got to convert some people. Hopefully I've converted a few people. Hopefully a couple of you were like, yeah, I didn't give a shit about that, but now I see the connection and I do. Hopefully that's happening. Hopefully that's happening. But look, on this show, you get multiple calls to action that you can do without leaving your computer. Every time I do a show, there were 2 today: BidenPromise.us, ActionNetwork.org, tell the Justice Department to investigate Ticketmaster. There are always 2, there are always multiple calls to action, at least one, maybe not always multiple, but there are always calls to action on this show. Something that you can do without leaving your computer. So, everyone who's like, oh, all these podcasts, they never come up with any solutions. Every episode, there's a call to action on this show. Every single episode. Every single episode. I'm sure not all podcasts do that. I know not all of them do. And we're in another very dangerous time where being policy agnostic is somehow seen as intelligent, and it's somehow seen as being productive. It's not. It's not. Whether you like it or not, policy affects all of our lives. You can still fight for policy without embracing politicians. You don't want to embrace politicians. That's fine. You can still try to get them to do things they don't want to do. It doesn't matter if you don't like the people in charge. You're probably never going to like the people in charge. If I didn't fight for policy unless I liked who was in charge of the Senate, I'd never frickin' fight for policy. No one likes Chuck Schumer. I would imagine Chuck Schumer doesn't even like Chuck Schumer, but that's not the point. You still got to go to the mat for frickin' policy. And we are living in an era, especially on in this little YouTube indie media, like YouTube beef sphere, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I wouldn't call it a scene. I think that's being too that's giving it too much credit. But whatever you want to call it, I know we're in a little zone now where being policy agnostic is somehow seen as being cool or edgy. It's not cool or edgy, nor is it sophisticated. It's just freaking lazy. That's what it is. It's freaking lazy, and it's just being contrarian for clicks. That's all it is. And it's amazing. There are people who watch some of these shows, and people who host some of these shows. They don't understand the difference between campaigning to pass a policy and campaigning for a politician. They think that campaigning for a policy is electoral politics. It literally isn't. They don't understand the difference between those two things, and they host a show that people watch. That is frightening. That is frightening. And what's more frightening is that a freaking comedian in his bedroom has to explain the difference to so-called journalists. I mean, it's beyond comical. Some of the people who claim to be journalists in this space, and they don't understand how basic policy works. They don't read a damn thing. They don't understand how campaigning for policy works. They don't understand the difference between localism and things at the federal level. And yet they're journalists. You should it's amazing. It's amazing. And it's to the point where, like, honestly, like, I don't I mean, part of me, I've thought about completely taking this show off YouTube. I still think about it. Just because I don't want to be part of it in any way. But I know that some of you guys get this show off of YouTube, and that's why I keep it on. But YouTube is absolutely miserable beyond comprehension to work with, the platform YouTube. And they and yeah, anyway. Enough of my complaining. You guys get it. But going to the mat for policy is a good thing. And getting involved in your community is a good thing. And seriously, start thinking about your food, the anatomy of your food. Start thinking about it. You have to. You don't have a choice. Because if this merger goes through, some of us are going to be in trouble. If you're just getting by, as many Americans are, this merger could be pretty consequential for you. Because prices are going to go up, and prices are already high. And there's already people who can't afford their groceries. It's going to get worse. If this merger goes through, it will get worse. So, you gotta do something. Anyway, so thank you guys for being here. We're gonna have the Patreon stream right after this. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And unless you're checking out, if you're checking out the audio podcast later, but we'll be doing the Patreon stream right after this. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy, she says meow, and I say peace, love, and a general strike.